Now, let's get more specifically into Civics for All, your nonprofit. Why found this nonprofit, and what are you ultimately trying to do with it, and what successes have you seen through Civics for All?
So, the idea, the whole sort of overarching idea behind it is to take the information that I was teaching my students in my intro level political science class at the College of Charleston called American Government and disseminate that information to as many people as possible. So that's the idea behind the organization. So in terms of why I decided to do that or why I decided that it needed to be done, um, it's another sort of story from my background. So it kind of goes back to 2016 for me, around the 2016 election. Um, my mom had just passed away in 2015, and I had taken some time away from teaching and my community roles, and was just sort of trying to heal. But as just an average citizen, I was sort of experiencing the same fear and anxiety, and all of that sort of stuff that was going on around the 2016 presidential campaign. And I saw former students of mine who were arguing with each other online about politics and threatening to disown people and never speak to people again because they disagreed with them. And I just was really sad about it. And I wanted to get involved and do something, but I wanted to do something positive. And so I wasn't sure, what exactly to do. And I thought about a couple of different things. And what I landed on was actually volunteering to work the elections that year at my local polling place in Charleston County. And so I just, just want to take a second to say for people who today may be overwhelmed by politics and overwhelmed by all of the anger and the vitriol, and just kind of not really knowing what to do. My advice is just to find one thing, one positive thing that you can do, that you have the talent, that you have the skills to do, and then focus on that. Just focus your attention and your efforts on that instead of, doom scrolling. Right? Or
Hmm.
instead of
Yeah.
arguing with people online. And so that's kind of what I did in 2016. So I decided to volunteer. Shout out to the Charleston County Board of Elections. You guys are awesome. It was such a rewarding experience for me to go through poll worker training and to learn how elections work. So, it's kind of weird that I'm saying that, right? As somebody who had already been teaching political science for years at that point, and who had studied and gotten graduate work done in political science. Um, but I guess, most of us, when we learn about things in political science that have to do with elections, we're learning about the national level, right? We learn about how the Electoral College works and, all of that sort of stuff. But what we don't learn about is every single state has different laws, right? We learned a lot about this at Ballotpedia. Every single state has its own
Hmm.
rules, right? About how elections are run, what dates elections can be held on, right? Even down to in some states, they only do vote by mail. That's the only option, right? Whereas in other states, they might not even allow vote by mail, right? So there are just so much variation in terms of voting laws and rules. And so being able to sort of get into the nitty gritty of my state at that time and the way that our elections were administered really helped me to even develop even more of a love and a trust for politics and government, just to see, the fact that you have every, county clerk across the country is basically recruiting an army of temporary workers and volunteers who are coming from their local communities to help them administer elections. And these people may be older retirees, or they may be, stay-at-home parents who don't have other jobs, or they may be people who are just out of work at the time. Right? These people are Republicans and Democrats and independents. They're coming from all different walks of life, but yet they're all coming together to help their local community to administer an election. And it's just something. There's something beautiful about that. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand how elections are administered, like how their votes are actually counted. And so that poll worker training is super helpful just to see how things work. Because in that lack of knowledge, what you actually have is this sort of opening for all of this misinformation and conspiracy theories and doubts and all of that sort of stuff to creep in. And so, I mean, if I had my way, it would be every 5 years, every American citizen would have to volunteer and have to work the polls, in their local area, just so that they understand how their system works. I'm sorry, that's my little headphone. Just so that they understand how their system
That's right.
works. Um, so basically, the situation or the experience that I had in 2016 with working my local elections in Charleston County, it gave me the opportunity to sort of see how our elections were administered, but it also gave me the opportunity to interact with voters on an individual level. So the job that I was doing, I actually went to work a couple weeks before the election, and the job that I was doing was working the phone bank. And so local voters would call
Okay.
and they would, ask whatever questions they had about the upcoming election. And so it was my job to answer those questions. And it gave me the opportunity to interact with all these voters from different walks of life who really cared, right? Who wanted to make sure that their votes were counted. But what I saw was that a lot of them had a profound lack of just basic civic knowledge. There were so many conspiracy theories coming from voters at that time, and this is 4 years before the controversial 2020 election, right? This is 2016. So I had people calling in that were upset about the color of the I voted sticker because they thought that it favored one party over another. People called in
Yeah.
who were um, upset at the order that the parties appeared on the ballot, not realizing that that order is actually set by statute and it rotates every election
Yeah.
cycle. So this year it may be that party that's on the top of the ballot, but next time it'll be a different party that's on the top of the ballot. And so all of these things were sort of spun into conspiracy theories by voters who were just really anxious and wanted to make sure that their votes were going to be counted properly. And so that is what kind of created this need in my mind, right? So I've got these two very different realities. On the one hand, I'm a former professor at that point of political science. I teach this intro level class. So I know that the students who I personally am dealing with, who I'm teaching in my classes, that they're learning this information, right? They have this basic level of knowledge. But then I'm working elections and I'm dealing with all of these voters who are calling in that are adults, who are living their lives every day who don't have this basic level of knowledge. And so I just wanted to find a way to bridge that gap and to share the information that I was teaching my students with as many people as I possibly could.
Yeah, you're speaking exactly to one of my values. Is one of the overarching things I do or reasons I do what I do is trying to bridge these civic knowledge gaps. And I mean, even every once in a while when I'm researching for these episodes, particularly the ones that I'm just doing on my own, even if it's a topic I know about, I'll find some new information. It's like, oh, huh, I didn't know that, and it really rounds out everything well. And it's even you and I who have been educated in this, it's a lot different when you actually ingrain yourself even more in the actual system. And I've thought about doing local election official stuff, especially because people don't realize how much it's almost, if not entirely, local or elections are administered by local governments. It's not state, and it's
Yeah.
certainly not federal. I mean, there you obviously have like federal elections commission and all, or commission and all that, but they don't handle all the really nitty gritty stuff. They're not the ones that bear the brunt of the cost of these elections. It's the local governments that do. And unfortunately, though, like you said, there's a lot of people that don't have this knowledge, and unfortunately, nefarious actors of all very political stripes capitalize on that to try to manipulate them, and that's partly why civics education is so important and really tamps down on this polarization. So